All right, so in this video, I want to give you an idea of what type of lesson plan I will want in this class. And I think by definition, the name is self-explanatory. Lesson plan talks about planning for your lesson. What do you want to teach and how you are going to teach it? So really, it's just a plan that you are going to do. Like, what do you want to teach and how you are going to teach it? So that's the lesson plan. That is in simple terms. But when we talk about lesson plan, there are so many things that come into mind. You can talk about what materials am I going to use, and nowadays we think about what standards am I going to achieve, what science standards am I going to achieve. Uh, really, um, the standards are important when you are making your lesson. It is something that we are going to talk about. But for now, one important aspect that I want to talk about in our lesson plan is first, you need to have an aim. Why do you want, or how did you arrange your things in your lesson plan? What was the purpose of your lesson plan, or the lesson that you're going to teach? What is its purpose? So really, one important aspect of a lesson plan is objectives. So each lesson plan that I will require from you, I need to see, and I need to see objectives of your lesson plan. So this video is mainly about this part of a lesson plan that we call objectives. So I will just describe these objectives a little bit. Normally, when you think about an objective, it is a description of performance you want learners to be able to exhibit before you consider them competent. That is, you consider the learners mastered, you consider that now the learners have mastered what you wanted them to learn. Really, it just describes an intended result of instruction. When you teach, what happens in the end? Can your students describe something? Can your students solve a mathematical problem? Can your students construct something? So that is an intended result of your instruction. The purpose of instruction is to ensure that our students can do or can perform specific functions that we intended them to do. Now, because of that, when making objectives, you need to be specific. So we are saying that instructional objectives are specific. So it should not be something like, I want my students to know. Know is not specific, right? So the term know, this one is not specific. You don't want to use that term in your objectives. You can say, I want my students to understand. So this one is not specific. So you don't want to use general terms to describe something. The question you are going to ask yourself is, how do I know that my students know? All right, they can calculate something, then that is more specific. Or they can describe something, that is more specific. They can interpret something, that is specific. That's what we want to do. Your objectives must be measurable. You need to be able to measure. How do I know that they have described something? How many questions have they answered? So really objectives, short term, observable students' behaviors. You need to be able to observe them constructing something. You need to be able to observe them defining something. So these are the instruction objectives that you need to have at the beginning of your lesson plan. Now, really, the aim of the objectives is just to provide direction of instruction. So if you are teaching something, you need to know how you are going to move from one point to another, or what direction you are moving with your lesson. What are you gonna teach? What sort of assessments are you going to give your students? If your objective is for the students to define something, then you need to give them an assessment that requires them to define things. If you want them to defend their position on something, you need to give them an objective that tells them, that asks them to defend a position or to make a judgment. So that's the aim of objectives. Also, intention. You write down objectives so that if you show your lesson plan to someone, that person knows that the intention of this lesson is to do this and this and this. So that's why we need objectives. Now, when writing down objectives, you really think about the components that an objective is going to have. And it depends on a specific type of objective that we use a lot. You will see that other objectives may not have these three components. But generally, in your objective, you need to be able to identify the type of activity in which competence is required. For example, by the end of this lesson, I want my students to be able to construct. So this one, construct, is the activity that you want to observe them doing. You want to observe them constructing something. Then you need to specify the criteria or standards by which competence in the activity will be assessed. So what do you want them to construct? You want them to construct a closed circuit composed of batteries, a switch, resistors, and connecting wires. So when you are assessing that, you look at it and say, oh, is the circuit closed? Yes, it is. So you give it a mark. Do I have a switch? Oh, yes, we have. Do we have resistors? Yeah, we have. What about the connecting wires? So that is the criteria or standard by which this competence is going to be assessed. You need it to be specific so that if someone is making an assessment, they need to know what to look for. So the third part is you gotta have to list any conditions or circumstances required for students to meet the objective. Do they meet this objective without being taught? Right? That's why here you need to be specific. Given 2 class periods, working with the materials at your lab station. So you need to know, by the end, I want my students to be able to do this and this after I have given them this specific type of instruction, or after they have read a specific paragraph, or after they have maybe looked at a certain video and observed the video and written down some information from that video. So these are the 3 components of an instructional objective. So another important thing about objectives is, when writing down objectives, you need to be able to indicate 3 things. What is the audience? Who are you writing down the objective for? What about the behavior? What do you want your students to do? Or what do you want your audience to do? What about the condition? Under which condition do you want your audience to do this activity? So if we take like the topic, forces and motion, and you want to write down objectives based on this topic. So you are saying, by the end of this lesson, students must be able to. So this is your audience, the students. This is your audience. The students must be able to. Now you write down the objectives. Define the terms of force and motion. So this one is the behavior, what you want your students to do. After reviewing class readings, now this is the condition under which this objective is achieved. Describe the motion of an object after an applied force. This is the behavior that you want your students to be able to do. Condition: after reviewing Newton's laws of motion. Calculate the net force of an object in motion. So that is the behavior that we want after laboratory activities and class discussions. So you can see that I am trying as much as possible to have all these 3 conditions there. My objective must have or is having an audience, behavior, and condition. So the condition part is really important, because you are just projecting how that objective is going to be achieved, or after what activities will the students being able, or will the class be able to achieve the objectives. Now when we think about objectives, we normally have a guideline. We have a guideline that gives us an idea how to write objectives. We use what we call Bloom's taxonomy. So Bloom's taxonomy really gives us a direction on what type of objectives we are going to write down. So when we talk about Bloom's taxonomy, we are thinking about 3 domains of Bloom's taxonomy. So domain one is the cognitive domain. This is what we mostly see in our classes uh, when writing down objectives. Most of the objectives that I have seen are from the cognitive domain. So this really just talks about understandings, awareness, insights. Um, Information that you need is the students are able to recall something, or they are able to understand a concept, they are able to solve problems. So that really deals with kind of intellectual or reasoning abilities. So it deals with reasoning abilities. That's what cognitive domain deals with. Now, the second domain is psychomotor. This deals with being able to use your hands or being able to use your senses. Right? So, being able to use senses, being able to follow directions, being able to replicate something. So the psychomotor objectives are dealing with just spatial skills. Can you dissect a frog? Or can you construct an electrical circuit? Right? Can you follow direction? If you see someone solving a mathematical equation, can you follow exactly how they have solved their problem? Can you take readings or blood sample? Can you weigh a certain object? Can you weigh its mass? Right? Can you determine its mass? The third one, affective domain, deals with attitudes, appreciations, relationships. If you are in a group, can you listen to others? Do you respect other people's opinions? Right? Can you work in a group? Can you lead a group? Things like those are in the affective domain. So when making your objectives, most of the time you need to be able to include all these domains in those objectives. And you will see examples of what I have done. Now let's move on and talk about these domains, starting with the cognitive domain. So as I said, the cognitive domain really deals with reasoning abilities. I think this was the first domain that Bloom made. So this domain has 6 parts. You can see here it's given as a pyramid. So down there we have remember. So remember mean your students should be able to recall facts and basic concepts. Like, can you define this? Right? Can you duplicate this? Can you list down this? So that is the remember part. I think it's the lowest type of knowledge under Bloom's taxonomy. So when teaching and making objectives, you want objectives that ask for the recall. Then we have understand. So this part, your students must be able to explain ideas or concepts. Can they classify something? Can they discuss? Can they locate, recognize, report, translate, interpret, things like those? Or translate, select. Then we have apply. In this case is, can my students use information in new situations? So execute, implement, solve, demonstrate, interpret, operate, schedule, sketch. So those are the types of verbs um, they can use, or as a teacher that you can use in your objectives. Then analyze. So analyze is really breaking down big ideas into chunks. So you have this big idea, you want to understand it more. So in this case, in simple terms, you are drawing connections among ideas. Differentiate, organize, relate, compare, contrast, distinguish, examine, experiment, question, test. Really, you want to understand the ideas more. You do that during the analysis. So what matters is, amongst your lesson objectives, I need to see verbs like this over there, and you things like that. Then we go on to evaluate. So evaluate is really up there on the pyramid. So you need to be able to justify, defend your decision, or stand. So the verbs that we usually use, things that you want your students to do, they should be able to appraise, they should be able to argue, defend, judge, support, value, critique, weigh. So really, this is higher order thinking. The last one here is create. This is kind of like synthesis. So you have chunks of information. You want to put information into one big overarching chunk, or you produce new or original work. These types of objectives are really, they work well for college kids or college students. So things like design, assemble, construct, conjecture, develop, formulate, author, investigate. So one example is kind of like write an essay. So that is, you are creating, or maybe summarize something. Right? You are bringing information together to create a summary. So those are the types of objectives that you can draw from the cognitive uh, domain. So let's see some examples of these objectives. Now, if you talk about remembering, I would say by the end of this class, I want my students to be able to define the following terms: force, velocity, and acceleration after classroom discussion. State Newton's first law of motion after class reading assignment. Recall Newton's 3 laws of motion after 2 periods of instruction. So you can see the verbs that I'm using here: define, state, recall. Those ones are among remembering. Understanding, we have restated Newton's first law of motion so they can say it in their own words. Relate the three laws of motion to each other. Explain the importance of understanding Newton's laws of motion after reading a story on the historical perspective of these laws. Applying. Predict the velocity of moving objects after a force is applied on them. Explain how the equation F is ma can be used to describe the motion of a vehicle on the Lewis grid. So in this case, you are applying. Solve the problem of car braking after discussing the equation F is ma. Analyzing, break down motion of a parachutist. So break down the motion of a parachutist. Distinguish the features of motion. Construct a diagram to show features of the projectile motion. So in this case, you are breaking down the knowledge into chunks that can be easily understood. Evaluate, defend the veracity of Newton's laws of motion after classroom discussion. Justify the use of the elevator problem to interpret motion in space. Use at least 3 points to critique Newton's laws of motion. Creating, design an experiment, write an essay, draw a concept map. So these are the types of objectives that are coming from the cognitive domain. Now, let's move on to the second domain, that is the affective domain. Affecting domain based on the Bloom's taxonomy are also given as a pyramid, but I didn't want to use the pyramid. So the pyramid, as usual, will look like this. So down here, the lowest form of affective domain is receiving. So the types of verb that you are going to use here: asks, chooses, listens, replies. Then we have responding. The types of verbs: participates, presents, helps. We have valuing. So values, demonstrate, proposes. We have organizing. So accepts, recognizes, prioritizes. Then we have characterizing. So in this case, displays, shows, cooperates, revises. So these are part of the Bloom's taxonomy action verbs that we can use in the affective domain. So this is the kind of the type of examples of the objectives we can write. Receiving, listen to others with respect. Listen for and remember the name of newly introduced people. Responding, participates in class discussions, gives a presentation, questions new ideas. One observation we can make from here, the affective domain don't have those three parts, like condition. So we usually don't add conditions and the like we do with the with the cognitive domain. So we go on. Valuing demonstrates belief in the scientific process, demonstrates sensitivity towards individual and, and cultural differences, shows the ability to solve problems. Organization accepts responsibility for one's behavior, accepts professional ethical standards, creates a life plan in harmony with abilities, interests, and beliefs. Characterization shows self-reliance while working independently, cooperates in group activities, or kind of display teamwork. Use an objective approach in solving problems. So if you are writing down a lesson plan, you don't need to tell me that this objective in the affective domain is coming from receiving, responding, or valuing. But you just need to show that in your objectives, you have included something from the affective domain, at least one or two objectives. So for the psychomotor domain, we have a lot of levels of psychomotor domain, but here I'll just use 4 levels. So the first level is perception, that is using sensory cues, this one. The second level is set, or readiness to act. The third level is guided response. In this case, you do something and the student follows exactly like you have done it. The fourth stage is mechanism. So this is basic proficiency. So these are the examples of verbs. Please study them. So when talking about the psychomotor domain, I just want to see that you have included something based on psychomotor domain. You don't need to tell me that this objective is coming from perception or is coming from set or guided response. I just need to know this objective is coming from psychomotor domain or it is a psychomotor objective. So please, you can write down these objectives and make sure that you go through them. Now, I will show you this activity and I'll make objectives based on this activity. Or I'll show you the objectives where this activity came from. Normally, when you are preparing your lesson plan, you are going to think about what science standards do or does my lesson plan achieve. So this part is very important. So what I have done is I went into the science standards and selected a standard that my objectives are going to address. So this is the science standard that I am addressing. So one of the standards says use evidence to construct an explanation relating the speed of an object to the energy of an object. So when I looked at this standard, I created my objectives, but I'll not show you the objectives now. I'll show you the objectives the next slide. So these ones were my materials. Now this is the activity that I gave to my students. I told them, guys, you need to work in groups. In your groups, push the solid ball at low speed to hit a certain solid block. Determine how far the solid block moves after being hit by the solid I would say the solid ball, not block again, by the solid ball. Push the solid ball at higher speed. So this is next activity. Push the solid ball at higher speed to hit the solid block. Determine how far the solid block moves. Calculate the work done in each case using the equation W is equal to Fd, that is force times distance. Make conclusions based on this observation. Check answers from your colleagues. So this is just a sample activity that my students are doing. I'm saying that this activity addresses this science standard. Now I will show you the objectives that I wrote based on this activity. And this is the way I want you to display your objectives. So when you are writing your lesson plan, this is the format that I want the objectives to look like. So for your objective must have a single statement. So must have a single statement. You can see this statement. It must always be there in your objective. By the end of this lesson, students must be able to. So just one statement. Here I say recall the definition of the term work after completing their lab activity. So because I have used recall here, I'm saying this objective is cognitive, but it is recall. Conduct an experiment to test the impact of speed on energy using the balls and blocks provided. So I didn't read this one. Manipulate the motion of the solid ball to change its speed. So this one is a psychomotor objective. Calculate the work done by the solid ball using their previous knowledge. So this is cognitive, but it is comprehension or understanding part. So I just say comprehension or understanding. So accurately hit the block using the ball provided. So this part is psychomotor. Listen to their group partners with respect. That is affective domain. Contribute to their group and class discussion. Affective domain. Explain the effect of speed on energy given the same conditions. So this is cognitive comprehension or understanding. Develop an explanation why gas mileage drops at higher speeds for vehicles. So this is cognitive applying. So another thing is when I'm writing down these objectives, you can see that some objectives I have given them the condition. For example, this one. This is the condition. This one. This is the condition. This one, the psychomotor, I haven't given it a condition. Here, I gave them a condition using their previous knowledge. This one, not really. So what I'm saying is you can give conditions to most of the objectives, but there may be some objectives from the cognitive section that will not need you to give a condition, right? So you may not need to say on every objective or after 2 hours of classroom or after completing, I want my students to be able to do this after completing reading this book. I want my students to be able to do this after uh, classroom discussion. So you may not be able to do that for all the objectives. So sometimes you may not need to add the condition. But most of the time when you are writing these objectives, you need to be able that you are including everything. You are including audience, the behavior to be done, and under what condition the behavior is supposed to be done. So this part is an important part in your lesson plan because it tells you, it gives you an information what you are going to teach and how you are going to teach it. So in the next video, I'll continue and talk about a specific lesson plan that you are going to be using, and that is the 5E lesson plan. Thank you.